the video last week from the practice. And it's also somewhat cautious, but she also said, show some grace because there aren't clear decisions. And I wanted those two specifically, because they are a little bit more on the cautious side, to interact with the agent, just kind of supporting the whole process. Sure. I think. Let's just see how long that.
I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Rockingham County School Board for July 27, 2020. Our first order of business is to approve the operating agenda for this evening. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda? Thank you, Ms. Laura. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Motion passes. Thank you. Now it's time to, would you join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag? Please join together in a moment of silence. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We have one person signed up this evening to speak here, and then the superintendent has a number of comments that were submitted electronically. I'd like to call on Leslie Miller, please.
Evening. I was not and yet I have my own unique perspective. I am responsible for future safety of children. Therefore, often let it reach agreeing with other educators around such as Fairfax, Nass, Fountain, Arlington, Fitzwilliam, Richmond, Rikers, tomorrow, Phillips, and Harrisonburg students who have heard teacher and staff are making plans for a virtual opening. We would like to state that we support a virtual power rather than a physical. Furthermore, if and when safe can be, we ask that masks be required while teachers, staff, and students of the age of 8. Given the recent research that the World Health Organization demonstrates that the spread of the virus happens to Europe primarily, and that this spread is exacerbated indoors, we do not believe it's safe to return, even in smaller groups. We absolutely cannot not require masks for all over the age of 8, given this research. Even more research states that the virus lingers in the air for hours, and that social distancing is much less restrictive than wearing masks. In order to protect both students and staff, masks must be required. We do expect full support on this. That is the bare minimum protecting the health of everyone. We find it troubling that more teacher and staff input was not considered prior to the July 6th meeting. In addition, we find it troubling that July 13th changed to an in-person. And those who are most concerned about their exposure at this are less likely to attend. We would ask for further decisions regarding the safe return, incorporate more input and opportunity from the teachers and teachers and school staff would be most at risk of assault, as we are being exposed to 40 students in classrooms every day. We will continually need to disinfect our classrooms, and keeping track of stuff. Schools do not operate like retail businesses or even restaurants. Our with us all day, increasing the level of exposure. Thus, efforts to reopen. We list a few of our pressing concerns that we need satisfactorily answered for reopening. Most schools have a small custodial staff without overtime or increased staffing. How are they realistically keep clean as it's necessary to sanitize the school building with the increased level of attending? How will students enter the building? How does the first? Who is monitoring students who congregate? When students go to the bathroom, are we okay with it not being AG? How will we manage the number of students who are in that closed space? How will quarantine work for outside events? How will we handle the volume of contact tracing? What happens when students are exposed outside of school? What if a student gets sick midday? What if their parents can't or won't come to pick them up immediately? What is the plan for them? What about some, most of whom are retired? Will they come in the building for weeks, days at a time, jumping into hybrid learning for minimal pay? Who will staff these classes? Secondary students transition multiple times a day. How do we prevent cross-contamination? Who is keeping the assistants in the hallways? Who is sanitizing between classes? How can teachers complete tasks? All of these, while also taking care of their food and safety. How do we expect students to social distance 8 hours a day when they haven't seen their friends, been away from their parents at home? How can we look at ethics, treat quality, rigor, diversity, choice, change, etc. under all boundaries, expectations, and teams do not and we miss our students. We especially miss the face-to-face interaction. We do not wish to be personal online. This has not been an ideal situation. especially given the remarks of the recent days. We believe our time and energy should focus on providing the best possible competence. Perhaps providing additional support for very limited small student groups, such as support teams for youngest students in education. Just way, our limited staff is education go a much longer way for safety for these students to be in person. You're happy to work to create a solution to this. If you're fully committed to your students and community. Thank you for this powerful students. We will put this on by 85. Yes, teachers and staff. Big games, Nancy, Brian Baker, Hillary Baker, Amy Baker, Cindy Baker, Jody Bell, Jessica, Bob Lewis, Sarah Lott, Tracy Matthews, Nathan Nick, Catherine McDonald, Lisa Meadows, Kathleen Milligan, Lydia Nick, Katie Moore, Sarah Lott, Mark Myers, Tracy Myers, Ed Price, Billy Oakland, Stephen Moore, Melissa Orville, Ashley Jenner, Joseph Pick, Andrew, Brimstone, Anna Sanders, Mary Schumann, Louise Silvano, Katie Heather Smith, Keith Sears, Becca Stone, Ann Cullen, Aja, Jada King, Rebecca Thomas, Ian Turner, Caroline Moore, Adrian White, Earl Garrett, Ed Bowles, Barbara Bowles, Ben Bowles, Brayton, Terry Bowles, Caroline Pack, Dawn Parker, Anthony Clark, Louise Shiner, Andy Cummins, Kelly, Karen County, Mark Green Cummins, Angie King, Rachel, Nadia Courtney Inslee, Kim Paul, Laura, Robin Gold, Brandon, Anna Friend, Amelia Vito, Art Helpman, Richard Dean Jr., Michelle Pack, Sarah Dennis, Nancy Hill, Gary Hughes, Betsy Cody, Beverly Jones, Senator, Diana Kent, Gifford, Amy Clark, Liz.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? Okay.
There we go. Is that better?
Okay, please state your name.
My name is Jen Nick, and I'm addressing as a parent in the county. I've got I've got a rising sixth grader, and I've got a rising fourth grader now. Fourth grader, yep. I just want to say thank you to you guys, because this is not an easy task. And I hear Miss Miller, and I completely understand. I know there's a lot of people who are very concerned about going back. I have my concerns. I think everybody has concerns. But I think it's important that our kids be in school if they can be. My rising sixth grader, it's so weird to think of them transition. My rising sixth grader has fed me. That's hard if you're not in school. I can work with them. I'm an educator. I can help them after school. But, when March 13th happened and we were home, it took them 2 days to tell me they didn't want me to be their teacher. And that's okay. That's all right. I just think, if there's any way our kids can be in school, that they should be in school. But if they shouldn't be in school, then they won't be. And I have complete trust in you guys that you will do what's right because you care about our kids just as much as we do. So thank you for all the hard work that you do on this. I really appreciate it. I know you don't make these decisions lightly. I know you put a lot of research into this. You put a lot of time into this. You've gotten a lot of input. It hasn't just been a decision where you're like, oh, this is what we're going to do and we're going to go with it. I appreciate the amount of input that you have allowed me as a parent, as someone in the school system. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood there's a lot of people who appreciate everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Dear Rockingham County School Board, I appreciate the careful thought that each of you are giving to how to safely educate the children of our community during this difficult time. Thank you for seeking the best strategy possible. I direct my church's after-school program, working with about 70 children who live in one of the trailer parks in the county. I'm extremely concerned for their academic progress, or more bluntly put, their lack thereof, and their physical safety at this time. Most of the children's parents work outside the home. Some of them never finished elementary school, and most are not fluent English speakers. In addition, most families have limited access to internet and do not have computers or other devices on which their children can do online schooling. The consensus last semester amongst most of the families was that the children were unable to do the schoolwork. Some never accessed the work at all. I know that the school division is trying to help parents obtain hotspots, and I really appreciate that. Are there plans to help low-income families obtain devices such as computers or tablets? If so, I urge the school division to implement a strategy to train parents in the use of these devices, as the children will need to be supported and monitored. Is there a care plan to help the children whose parents must work outside the home? I'm extremely concerned for the many children who will be left alone or with improper supervision. Thank you for considering these matters of utmost importance. Sincerely, Sandy Hernandez, Associate Director for Alianza Ministries of Covenant Presbyterian Church.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? All right. Dr. Cycle.
As during past meetings, we posted a link on the agenda at which those members of the public who cannot be here in person could provide their comments. And so as of the beginning of this meeting, there were approximately 37 comments, I believe. And I think the board wanted to make a decision about how we proceed with those. In general, public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we indicated that on the public comment form as well, so that when read out loud, that the comments should be kept to a length that could be accommodated in 3 minutes. There's also typically a 30-minute overall limit on public comments, but again, the board has the right to extend the time frame as board members please, and so I would like for the board to provide direction on how you want me to proceed, because certainly, unlike in past meetings where I read comments, there are more comments tonight than would be possible in 30 minutes. I don't know how much longer it would be, but also that some of the comments are longer than would likely be accommodated in 3 minutes. I'm looking for some guidance from the board on how to handle those.
We have the capability of posting these comments for the public to read, correct?
We do. Comments certainly could be posted tomorrow on the agenda in the public comment section. So it could simply be a public document that contains all of the comments.
Well, how about, in the interest of brevity, you can read some of the comments, and if it turns out that they're looking like they're going to be long and repetitive, then we'll uptime them for 3 minutes, and then you can give a flavor of what the comment was, and then if we post them, then everyone can read them if they have interest. Does that sound reasonable?
So we're going to we'll start reading them, and then anything that he starts reading that's over 3 minutes, we just stop 3-minute part. We can go on to the next one. And then when we get to 30 minutes, we'll see how many are left. Do we want to do that?
I think that's a good idea.
think the other important thing to mention is that obviously these comments are directed to the board, and the board will receive a full version of those comments.
Absolutely.
So anything that's not read publicly does not mean that the board has not seen it, has not considered it, because we have access to those that have been submitted.
And I do believe the vast majority will be under 3 minutes. If that's how you want to proceed, then I will.
Is that agreeable?
Okay. So first comment is from T. Shoemaker. I'm very concerned about the fact that COVID is present in our community and is rising. And even with the relatively low statistical probability that there will be deaths, these deaths are fairly preventable with longer-term distance learning education. I'm not saying that distance learning should extend into upcoming years, but just until we are able to tame this thing. According to a recent article I read, vaccines are imminent, but not until December at the earliest. In my opinion, if in-person learning without a vaccine happens and even one death occurs as a result of community spread because we've opened schools, we are responsible for that death. Are we really okay with this? If we continue forward with modified learning and then pivot just before school begins, or in the beginning weeks of school, if COVID numbers rise, trying to adjust to complete distance learning will again be an enormous adjustment for parents, teachers, and children. If we truly wish to offer a quality distance education, it would be much more profitable to begin working now to create a spit and shine curriculum that meets all the educational points we need to consider, rather than being pushed off balance partway through the beginning of the year. Waiting until too close to the beginning of the school year to make this decision is detrimental to the teachers who are planning lessons and to the families who need to be making plans for work and childcare. Of course, in-person education is better quality, but not if it is stripped away before we can even get fairly started. It seems then that we will have taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Next comment is from Kate Quarter. Given the recent decision of Harrisonburg City to go to an all virtual option except for ELL students or students with IEPs, will RCPS be considering and perhaps pursuing a similar option? Next comment is from Angie Clemens. Last Wednesday night, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Scheiko and 2 board members in a Zoom conversation. I'm sharing here what I said in that meeting with a slight addition at the end. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I affirm that the concerns already expressed regarding masks, community health data trends, and testing ability, upcoming potential super spreader events, and the district staff survey resonate strongly with elementary school staff, particularly regarding the survey. The area of concern I've heard the most feedback to relates to leave time. Given testing turnaround times, the possibility of needing to be out for more than 1 testing cycle, being encouraged to stay home if there is any question about health, and possibly being out extended periods if we contract the virus, the support has felt minimal. We understand the financial burden leave policy places on the district, which is why virtual learning at this point feels like a more responsible choice. Specifically to elementary, recess, and relatedly physical education. These important aspects of the school day are important for reasons that make them particularly hard to manage social distancing and safe health practices. We are concerned that there has been a go-ahead to include these with little guidance on how to do so safely. Classroom teachers will be spending many hours indoors with a population that has little control of who they come in contact with outside of school. This is not a population known for great physical self-control, and teachers will have fewer options for teacher breaks, even bathroom breaks, given the differences of the situation. This is a concern for teacher mental health. Resource teachers come into contact with large numbers of students each day, increasingly exponentially over the school week. We are concerned about what we carry to so many students and across multiple buildings in some cases, as well as our personal contact. Additionally, many of us are being asked to go into multiple classrooms over the course of each day. This feels like a very large health risk. We do not know the routines each teacher has established for safety and health, or when a student has already visited the nurse or the bathroom. And maintaining this complicates the teaching time we would have. Similarly, we would not have control of the space and equipment we would be using. As a fine arts teacher, I do want to express deep gratitude for the continuing recognition of fine arts education. I recognize that not all teachers across the state are feeling that, and I don't take it lightly. We're so eager to connect again with our students. After the Zoom conversation ended, I found myself reflecting on the concern expressed about teachers fearing retribution for speaking honestly about our concerns. I sent this follow-up email to Dr. Scheiko A better way to express what I've heard more often is a feeling that while we may be given opportunities to provide feedback, it doesn't seem to make an impact in the decision making. I'm not sure how that can be addressed, since it feels like there are avenues in which the district is trying to provide answers to questions, but maybe more transparency about who's making the decisions on the plans would be helpful. I'm grateful for all the work you and the board are doing to make our plans, basing decisions not on news stories, but on data global and local. Whether or not it happens on August 31st, the hybrid model will need to be implemented at some point. Such a chance to provide feedback and how that can be most effective is appreciated. Sincerely, Angie Clements, elementary general music teacher, John C. Myers Elementary. The next comment, Amanda Thompson. I asked the board to consider offering non-traditional live meeting times for elementary school families, choosing the all virtual school option. Many families have two working parents who want to be involved in their children's education and want to help facilitate learning. If the only time synchronous learning is available is during the traditional school workday, these parents may not be able to be as involved in supporting their children this year and would be leaving this daunting task on the shoulders of childcare providers. I'm sure teachers providing virtual instruction would be willing to consider non-traditional working hours. If you asked, please consider this option. And it's Amanda Thompson. The next comment is from Leah Kirkpatrick. As a teacher and parent in RCPS, I'm deeply concerned for the health and safety of staff, students, and families should we return to school physically this fall. Our local healthcare providers do not currently have access to adequate testing or contact tracing of COVID-19. The test turnaround time is far too slow to allow our schools to respond appropriately should a student or staff member contract the virus. Further, as of May 29th, Governor Northam mandated that people ages 10 and up wear cloth face coverings when spending time in indoor public settings, including state and local government buildings in areas where the public accesses services, a category which should logically include schools. For the safety of staff and students, particularly those with pre-existing conditions or at-risk family members, this is the most basic form of protection that we can currently provide. Not to do so seems negligent. Please consider moving to a fully virtual learning model until adequate testing and contact tracing are available. Short of that, please at least address the inadequacies of the current RCPS mask policy. Next, Sarah Spinagle Ward. I would like to know what plan RCPS has in place for substitute teachers and other school staff, including bus drivers, in the event that teachers, etc., contract COVID-19 and have to be out for extended periods of time. 4+ weeks is not uncommon, or are exposed by a COVID-19 positive student staff member who wasn't wearing a mask and goes out on quarantine for 14 days. My understanding is Virginia is now requiring 2 negative COVID-19 tests before employees can return to work after a positive test, with most tests taking 7+ days to come back. That alone will lengthen time out even more. It is my understanding that we were struggling to find enough substitutes before this started. How will this be handled? Will classes be closed suddenly and parents will have to scramble for care? Will classes be combined, leading to even less safe environments? Will teachers be expected to give up planning time and work extra hours to cover long-term vacancies? I work in healthcare administration, and I have seen how this has been a very real struggle in healthcare and will be a struggle for schools. Thank you for your time and response. Next comment is from E. Rain. There is a good bit of back and forth about what to do for childcare if we were to move to an all virtual distance learning program. This is a hard question and needs to be considered very carefully. Businesses and employers should be encouraged, certainly, to make as many accommodations as possible or to make flexible and appropriate work hours. Over a long time, schools have morphed into an education /daycare /food pantry /driving service /dentist /eye care /psychologist behemoth. And returning our teachers to only teaching is going to be a difficult process. In my opinion, though, this fall, that's what should be done. Because on the other side of the coin is a risk I'm not sure any of us are prepared to make, even if we say we are: the lives of the children, their families, the educators, and their families. Until a vaccine is available, it's not a risk worth taking. The next comment is from Kaiser Swarfar. Dr. Scheichel and RCPS school board members, I'm writing to you not only as a science teacher at J. Frank Hilliard Middle School in Broadway and as a resident of Bridgewater, but also as a concerned citizen regarding the return to school plan currently in effect for RCPS. I appreciate the careful scientific and research-based approach that this plan was given. However, while parents were contacted and asked to give input when creating this plan, the division's teachers were not asked to do so until after a major decision and presentation had already been made. Teachers should have a real voice in the process. After all, without teachers, our students would not be receiving an education. My main concerns for returning to teach in person at J. Frank Hilliard in the fall are safety for all. Masks. I would feel more comfortable being in the classroom with my students if masks were worn all the time by everyone. Understand that this could potentially increase the amount of time students touch their masks or face with their hand until they are used to it. But with proper hand washing, sanitizing, this should not be an issue. I would suggest giving students 5 to 10 minute mask breaks during each class. Students must stay at their seat during this break. I worry that students will not remember that they need to put their mask on when they get up for various reasons while in the classroom. It also would make it easier to approach a student to assist them from 3 feet and to walk around to check on student work. Ventilation. Many of our buildings do not have the best ventilation, and the AC/heat systems are very inconsistent. It is often too hot or too cold in parts of the building. If it is too hot in a classroom, it will be very hard to feel comfortable with a mask. Research has shown that having windows open will reduce the transmission risk. Transitions. How will we enforce that students stay at least 3 feet apart and are masked when transitioning between classes? How will we enforce students not congregating in the bathrooms? Recess. Supervising students during recess is going to be difficult, and I do not understand why J. Frank Hilliard Middle School would have recess when no other elementary middle school will. Substitutes. The lack of substitutes is a known fact in our school system, and knowing how hard it has been in the past to find substitutes, worry that, as in the past, many teachers will be required to cover a class with students that do not belong in their current group. This opens up yet another opportunity for exposure to the virus for everyone involved. Respectfully, Kaiser Swarfer. John Knopf. As a long-term employee of Rockingham County Public Schools, I urge you to strongly consider postponing the return of teachers, staff, and students to regular modified classroom settings. It is well established that the COVID-19 virus is an invisible, highly contagious, and lethal killer. This is evidenced by the fact that over 140,000 Americans and over 625,000 people worldwide have died from the coronavirus pandemic. We also know that this pandemic is far from over and that most likely tens of thousands more Americans will perish from this disease. I urge you not to dismiss science and the opinions of the majority of public health officials. They have warned that putting students and teachers into the close confines of a classroom will result in more deaths from this disease. The rush to reopen our country has already resulted in hundreds of thousands of more cases of the coronavirus, and the rush to reopen our public schools will only exacerbate the situation. If you have not already been personally affected by this disease, it is highly likely that you will be. People that you know and love will become infected and potentially die from putting students back into the classrooms. Please have the strength and courage to make the right decision for students, staff, teachers, and their families. I implore you to resist the voices of profit and convenience and to delay the return of students and staff to classrooms until a proven vaccine can be administered to every citizen and until this deadly pandemic has been contained. Thank you for allowing my voice to be heard, and thank you for your distinguished service as we need your wise leadership more than ever before. Next comment is from Rebecca Stoner. The school board, I do not feel we can return to school safely at this time as much as I would love to do so. I understand research has been conducted on the reopening of schools in other countries. However, I do not feel it appropriate to compare the reopening of schools in other countries to the reopening of RCPS. We simply do not have the same resources or personnel available. How will students be kept apart while traveling the hallways? Where will a student go if they feel ill during the school day but cannot go home? How will we properly sanitize with custodians not always available? How will teachers take proper leave if infected with COVID? Who will substitute for these teachers? Teachers may need substitutes with virtual learning as well, but that need will dramatically decrease if teachers are not potentially exposed to the virus while in a school building. These are only a few of the logistical questions that need to be solved before RCPS can reopen safely. While there may be some long-term effects that students, families, and staff may need to work through as a result of keeping schools closed at this time, the potentially permanent life-threatening effects that COVID-19 could have on students, families, and staff will be irreparable. We must not sacrifice the health and lives of students, families, and staff to have schools reopen for a short period of time, only to be shut down again due to an outbreak. Even if funding is at stake, we must keep our priorities in order. We must value each life in our RCPS community, including each student, each family member, and each staff member. Kate Hollenberg. I'm wondering if it might be possible to allow students to come in person for 1 week or even 2, starting on that August 31 date, using the hybrid plan so that teachers can meet students, learn about them, establish guidelines and expectations, and disseminate information and paperwork as necessary. Then after that time frame, we can continue learning 100% virtually until it is safe for students and staff to come back together or evaluate at the end of that 2-week time frame how things are going, if it's safe to continue in person. There's so much value in getting to meet students in person, especially if Zoom limitations might include not getting to see students' faces on camera. Next comment is from Jonathan Nicholas. The use of Confederate names in educational institutions is a relic of Virginia's massive resistance to school desegregation in the late 1950s. The governor recognizes this. School districts around the state have recognized this, including those directly bordering our county. We're asking that you, our school board members, recognize this as well. With each week that passes, more Virginia districts are removing the names of Confederate soldiers from their schools because they have acknowledged this legacy of massive resistance. Turner Ashby's name was chosen for our high school to subjugate Black students in response to desegregation and to aid in painting a nostalgic picture of the Confederacy, a place where these students would be enslaved today. Failing to take action by voting to change this name reflects poorly on our community. Next comment from Hillary Baker. In order for schools to open safely, I see at least 2 primary issues that should be addressed. The first is a matter of resources. Schools need to have adequate resources and personnel to make sure that schools are clean, students are distanced, and safety procedures can actually be followed. At this time, many schools do not even have the proper custodial staff for regular cleaning pre-pandemic. We have heard that hand sanitizer will be difficult to procure, both due to expense and possible shortage. And we already have a shortage of substitutes and bus drivers that will undoubtedly be exacerbated by the many safety concerns both of these jobs pose to vulnerable populations. This lack of resources, as well as the many logistical concerns that teachers have posed in the last few weeks, need to be addressed in order for schools to open safely. The second factor is the ability of our local health systems to test, provide test results in a timely manner, and conduct contact tracing so that we can try to keep the virus out of our schools. At this time, our local systems are once again seeing a shortage of available tests, with tests running out within an hour or two of opening and test results taking anywhere from 8 to 11 days to come back. This lengthy turnaround time makes contact tracing difficult and increases the risk of exposure from a potentially infected person who might still feel the need to work or attend school. Right now, it is fair to say that our systems are not robust, and I have no doubt that opening schools will likely tax many of these already fragile systems even more. I choose to be a teacher because I enjoy being in the classroom, interacting with students. I've spent 4 years in Rockingham County as an educator, and I have enjoyed an excellent school environment at East Rockingham High School that is very supportive of teachers and students. I believe that I have done my utmost to educate and help my students, and my goal is to continue that this year. However, I also don't think I am wrong to be concerned for my safety and my health, as well as for the health and safety of my high school students, when we know that they too can contract this virus and be affected by it. My concerns about reopening come not because I don't wish to teach my students in person. Nothing could be further from the truth. But I cannot feel confident in my safety when these 2 major factors have not been addressed. I know that the school systems are balancing many concerns, and I cannot imagine the stress of this kind of decision. I believe this should be a public health decision, and it strikes me as strange that our state has not given more guidance in this issue, leaving this heavy burden on just a few individuals. However, I ask you to also consider the burden of the school staff and teachers who in just a few weeks will be on the front lines, worrying not just about the quality of the education being provided, but whether every cough or sneeze could result in someone in the room contracting this serious illness, whether our own health might be compromised, and how all of this will affect our lives. We want to provide the best education possible for our students, but I question whether this environment is the best way to do so. Thank you for hearing my concerns. Next comment is from Kathleen Milligan. Speaking as a teacher in the Rockingham County Schools, I'm not comfortable with opening schools to in-person classrooms during the fall of the 2020 school year. Schools can't effectively open until a testing regimen is in place and individuals can be quarantined pending positive results. We do not have the resources to provide the necessary supplies for students and teachers, nor do we have the extra staff needed to monitor students in hallways, lunch areas, and bathrooms during breaks, along with new constant cleaning requirements. I'm deeply concerned about the requirements for masks only in the hallways and not while students are at their desks. While I wear a mask, it protects the students from me. When my students wear masks, it protects me from them. As I understand it, students will not be required to wear masks at their desks, which leaves the teacher completely unprotected from the spread of the virus during class instruction. Like many others, I am at very high risk from the coronavirus and would not survive if I were to become infected. I do not feel safe returning to the classroom under those conditions. I strongly urge the board to consider distance learning for at least the first semester of the 2020-2021 school year until more safety measures can be put into place or when we are not in the midst of a pandemic. As the teachers are the ones who will be implementing the new procedures, I hope you will hear our voices as we express our concerns. Thank you. Marge Halterman has the next comment. As a concerned teacher in Rockingham County, I would first like to express my gratitude to Dr. Scheiko, Charlotte McCorkin, and Renee Reed for taking time out of their busy summer this past week to meet with the teachers who expressed their list of concerns about returning to school via the letter to the school board. I would also like to mention that I've taught in this county for 29 years at J. Frank Hilliard Middle School and have never feared any sort of negative retaliation for expressing my thoughts or concerns to either my administrators or superintendents at any time. That said, I do have multiple concerns about returning to school under the present proposed AB plan on August 31st. First, research is extremely conflicting about the role children play in contracting and or spreading COVID-19. While there is research that indicates children are less likely to do so, please keep in mind that less risk doesn't mean no risk. Florida data shows that children in that state have a 31.1% positivity rate for COVID-19 infection. Second, will there be enough PPE to supply our 26 buildings, 11,600 students, and 2,000 full-time employees throughout the county for an extended length of time? Third, we know what our online learning looked like in the spring. We know we need more support, professional development, and resources in this area. Is there a plan in place for strengthening online learning, and when will we learn of it? Fourth, as much as I appreciate the promise of better filters to improve fresh airflow in buildings, the truth is, in our building, the airflow is not equal at all. Some classrooms are hot and stuffy year-round, and others are freezing. We will be expected to be confined for 85 minutes at a time in a classroom with at least 12 students and unable to open any windows. Added to that, students will be able to remove their masks while sitting at desks stationed 6 feet apart. Many middle school students sneeze and cough at will without regard to using their inner elbow or covering their mouths. Not safe. Fifth, students will use the restroom during class only. How will we monitor the number of students who are in that confined space throughout the school day? 6, teachers in certain areas of our building shared student restrooms due to the lack of staff restrooms in close proximity. I'm not willing to share student restrooms upon returning to our building, but in order to access a staff restroom, I would need to walk a long distance and expose myself to students of different grade levels that I wouldn't have to if there were staff restrooms close by. 7, 2 individuals working in Harrisonburg City School Board have tested positive for COVID-19 just yesterday, and they have closed all offices until August 7. This raises even more concerns for me. 8, I'm a high-risk individual living with a high-risk spouse at home. I would like to ask the division to allow me to work from home as a part of the RCPS Learning Academy until circumstances in our area greatly improve. 9, I'd like to close by saying that from an infectious disease standpoint, returning to school in an all-virtual capacity appears to be the best route for all concerned. I trust that the members who make up our school board will weigh everything concerned and make the wisest and safest decision for everyone, our children and adults alike. Thank you for listening. Next comment is from Rebecca Thomas. As a teacher, I'm very concerned about returning to school in person for this fall. Please understand that I would love to see my students and coworkers in person again. I also fully admit that online teaching is not my favorite thing to do. Even with those things being said, I still think that a virtual start to the school year is the safest option for students and staff. I believe there are still too many unanswered questions regarding the spread of COVID-19 and its lasting effects. There are also too many unanswered questions about implementing the current plan to return to school. With the current plan, it will be essential to implement it well. Any other option puts students and staff at risk. There are many aspects of the proposed plan, but it still doesn't answer many of the questions that teachers have about how it will actually work in classrooms. Unless those questions can be answered, it seems unsafe to put students and staff in the buildings. I know there are many opinions about reopening school buildings and on providing kids with in-person instruction, but there's still lots of steps to take before that seems like a safe option. As a school board, please truly think about the potential ramifications of an in-person plan failing. With that thought in mind, please seriously consider a virtual opening for this year so that the safety of students and staff is the primary focus. Next comment is from Holly Scott. I'm a teacher in Rockingham County Schools. Please reconsider holding schools in person. If we do open in person, please require masks be worn at all times inside the building. I'm sure you've read the open letter of concern signed by 239 scientists noting potential airborne transmission of the virus. Quoting from the report, it is understood that there is not as yet universal acceptance of airborne transmission of SARS-CoV-2, but in our collective assessment, there's more than enough supporting evidence so that the precautionary principle should apply. In order to control the pandemic, all routes of transmission must be interrupted. Scientists state that hand washing and social distancing are appropriate, but in our view, insufficient to provide protection from virus-carrying respiratory microdroplets released into the air by infected people in daily life, not just generated by hospital procedures. Wearing masks at all times indoors is one way to address concerns about potential airborne transmission. Mostly remote instruction would work even better. We give parents a choice of keeping their children at home, acknowledging that a reasonable person might feel that attending school in a building is too risky. Yet we have no similar provision for teachers. I'm concerned that we are seeking compromise rather than putting the science first, arguing to ignore science and open as normal and arguing to err on the side of caution, giving evolving research and current levels of community spread are not two equally extreme positions. The truth isn't always in the middle, and not all compromises are scientifically sound. Better compromise in this situation may be to open in person only for students with special needs. Please consider a remote start to the year for the majority of students. If schools reopen in person, please require everyone wear masks indoors, even when 6 feet apart. Thank you for the time and care you are all devoting to this issue. The next comment is from Diana Kemper. Dear Dr. Scheichel and members of the board, I'm writing today as a deeply concerned parent and teacher. I sincerely want to be back in the classroom teaching my students, and I really want my 4 boys to continue to receive the wonderful quality in-person education that RCPS has to offer. I desperately want life to be normal again. However, I am aware that the current health crisis created by the spread of the virus that causes the disease known as COVID-19 makes a return to normalcy nearly impossible in the near future. As much as I want to be in my classroom as I have for the past 16 years, I do not feel it is safe for Rockingham County Public Schools to open for in-person learning given the current condition in our community. At this time, our community does not have access to the testing capabilities needed to open. The CDC recommends the testing and contact tracing be readily available in communities in order for districts to offer in-person instruction. We do not meet that standard. I know of several symptomatic people who have recently gone to medical clinics requesting a test, only to be told that they are out of tests for the day. One individual was told that the medical facility that they went to for testing typically runs out of tests within 1 or 2 hours of operating. Moreover, those who are able to get tests are told that their results will take anywhere from 5 to 14 days to return. This means that if a student or staff member in our schools tests positive for COVID-19, it could potentially take 2 weeks to know for sure if someone spread the disease throughout the school. In that time, they could potentially infect countless others. There are a few clinics that have rapid tests available, but data is showing that those tests are not accurate, especially if the symptomatic individual has not shown symptoms for at least 3 to 5 days at the time of testing. I'm also concerned because I've not heard that the protocol for our district once a student or staff member is symptomatic and or positive for COVID-19. In addition, are parents required to inform the school if their child has a positive test? If not, how will we be able to protect our families if we were potentially exposed but did not know? I'm aware that RCPS is currently planning to offer the option of virtual instruction for parents who are concerned about sending their children into an environment where they potentially could contract the virus. My husband and I are opting for fully virtual instruction for our children, as several members of our household are considered high risk. However, this does not keep my family safe since I'm a teacher and I'm being asked to return to a classroom where students are not required to wear masks at the desks according to the district policy at this time. The governor of Virginia issued an order mandating that people over the age of 10 wear cloth coverings when spending time in indoor public settings, including state and local government buildings. and areas where the public accesses services. It seems to me that this would extend to schools, especially given that we will be in an enclosed space for an extended period of time, and this is the type of environment where the virus spreads most rapidly. We'll be at high risk for contracting the disease, and thought of being a person who brings it home to my at-risk family members is absolutely crushing. I believe teachers deserve the same protections offered to other workers across the Commonwealth. I'm asking the board to consider a fully virtual opening, and if we must reopen, please require masks for everyone in the building at all times for the sake of protecting and preserving the lives of the at-risk students, staff, and family members in our RCPS community. Next comment is from Terry Butler. Dr. Scheichel and members of the school board, I appreciate the opportunity to voice my concerns through public comment. While all of us, teachers, administrators, students, and parents, would like a 100% normal physical return for students and teachers, the broad power of COVID-19 has made that option impossible. Many RCPS employees are increasingly concerned for the hybrid plan that has been voted on for the start of the school year. I'm concerned personally as I close in on the older age group of teachers with some health concerns that could be exacerbated should I contract coronavirus. My husband is at high risk, and also because of age. Returning virtually is the safest method for return. By returning virtually for the time and making that decision now, students will have time to adjust to this decision and prepare for the upcoming year. Parents will have adequate time to find childcare and make preparations for home-based learning, and teachers will be able to focus on one method to teach and deliver instruction. The logic of beginning this school year in a physical return as COVID looms larger in our area than when we closed in March is lost on me. A virtual opening is the safest for everyone amidst this novel pandemic that leaves us with more questions than answers. While opening virtually is my preference, if RCPS maintains the decision to physically open with a hybrid plan, scientists and physicians advise that wearing masks significantly reduces the ability to infect one another, especially for students aged 10 to adult. And yet RCPS has not made that recommendation. I know that because I served on the secondary reopening committee, and the committee was told that RCPS would not be recommending face coverings 100% of the time for this age group because an administrator at central office had said that decision was already made. The CDC has come out with weak resignation on their guidelines, but that should not prevent RCPS from taking stronger measures to protect students, staff, teachers, and administrators, and families. A stringent countywide plan for face coverings should be implemented at the start of the school year in a physical opening scenario with adequate repercussions for student neglect or refusal and adequate leniency for those students with medical issues that make it difficult to comply. Face coverings worn at all times in this setting is a very small concession to make for faculty and staff to feel safe and for schools to open in a hybrid fashion. Many RCPS teachers and families hope that the scientific data alone is proof that we need to begin school at the virtual only level. In our community, local contact tracing and testing is insufficient. Tests are severely limited, and a rapid result test with a negative outcome and a 2-day return time only ensures that you must take another more reliable COVID test. When the results are delayed anywhere from 7 to 10 more days, at this point, I learned that a parent of one of my students was tested for COVID and at the 11-day mark still had not received results, but we are doing better than any other country with testing. This lengthy turnaround time renders the tests useless. The combination of all these factors must weigh heavy on anyone's decision to go about business as usual, but particularly so when considering whether to open our school doors where our business is children and where we have pledged to keep all its attendees safe. Thank you for hearing my concerns. Terry Butler. Next comment is from Amberly. It feels like going back to school in person is a risky option. However, there's unfathomable value in seeing students in person. I don't think the current state with the virus makes going back to school in person the safest option, but if we implemented students in school once a week, we could establish some background for relationship building and advisory time to keep positive communication while also having smallest groups in our room at one time. I don't know if this is the best venue for me to make such specific recommendations or requests, but as a teacher, I'm unsure where my outlets are for professionally expressing my concerns, where they will be heard by the most people and make a difference. I hope teachers, as the frontline workers, can be included more in the decision-making processes of this historic decision. Next comment is by Olivia Haimani. I just wanted to point out that just days after the opening of the MLB season, games are already being postponed due to COVID-19. I understand this is very difficult to decide if schools should open for in-person instruction yet, but I feel like that even with all the resources in the world and testing, it cannot be kept out of the marlins, so I don't see how we can expect our schools to fare better. The virus is still so new, we are unsure of the long-term complications in many it may cause. I hope you will err on the side of caution, and I thank you for taking this so seriously and putting the health of our kids and community front of mind. Next comment is from Megan Sheffer. I'm very concerned about the health and safety procedures that the school system will be using once in-person classes resume. I have not seen any mention of the sanitation protocols that janitors should be using to ensure that our schools will be cleaned. There has been no mention of temperatures being taken before staff or teachers can enter the building. No one has addressed how the system will be handling those employees who cannot wear a mask and how they will be interacting with students. Will students have access to water fountains, and how often will they be cleaned? Have motion sensor paper towel dispensers and sinks been installed? This should have been the first thing that was discussed when working on a back to school plan. It's alarming that this plan has not been mentioned to the school board and insinuates that there is no plan. For the learning plan to work, students and employees need to stay safe and healthy. This isn't going to magically happen without a plan and community support. Thank you. Next comment is from Kate McDonald. Dr. Scheichel and members of the school board, I'm a teacher in the Rockingham County school system. I'd like to express a few concerns that I have about the reopening of school in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I miss my students and I miss my classroom and I miss my coworkers, but quite frankly, I'm nervous. My school's mission statement mentions educating kids in a safe way, and I'm not sure that is what we would be doing if we brought them back to the classroom, even with the hybrid model. With case numbers on the rise, today, Monday, July 27th, marks the second highest day of cases since the beginning of COVID reporting in our state. Universities returning in a few short weeks, and super spreader events like the Rockingham County Fair. There are too many unknowns to make me feel confident about being able to return safely. This area has a shortage of tests and a huge lag in reporting. I can speak to that personally. After months of living with a spouse who works in the hospital with COVID patients, I thankfully never had a COVID scare due to the safety techniques employed both in our home and at Sentara RMH. In late June, I was exposed to a COVID positive person while at a small 12-person family event. We were well within our phase 2 rights, but it didn't mean that we were safe, or that, admittedly, we were making the right decision. The positive person was pre-symptomatic, feeling great, not showing symptoms, and completely unaware of her positive condition. A few days later, she experienced symptoms and alerted me, and I was tested twice. One test came back immediately and was negative, but I was warned to wait for the second test. 8 days later, I was told that I was positive, and it turned out that every other person at that event tested positive. I quarantined for 4 weeks and decided to get another test done. I was told that they had run out of tests for the day and to return the next day for first thing in the morning. I was tested again a few days ago and told my result will take a week. What happens when a student or faculty member is exposed, whether at school or not? What if they experience the same pre-symptomatic period that ultimately got me and 10 other people sick? What if they can't get tested right away, or they receive a false negative and their results come back 8 days or more later? All of those testing problems happened to me and my spouse. This doesn't even address the slow and unreliable contact tracing program. If and when we do return to school, and I say when because I absolutely understand that we can't be virtual forever, it needs to be in a safe way. There are way too many questions about implementation that haven't been addressed. Why will the students be able to remove their masks? Will we have extra custodians in each school? In normal school settings, our classrooms aren't fully cleaned every day because there simply is not time. Will bathrooms be cleaned multiple times a day instead of just in the evenings? We are already running double and triple bus routes for students because we don't have enough bus drivers. How will that be addressed? My spouse in the hospital system is exposed to COVID, suspected or positive patients every single day, and because of the extensive PPE provided, has remained safe, at least while at work. What PPE will be provided to us? How often will we receive new PPE? I'm often asked to act as a substitute for my colleagues because we do not have enough substitutes. What happens when faculty members are asked to quarantine for 2 weeks and we don't have substitutes to cover the classroom? Speaking for myself, my mild case would not have impeded me from offering virtual instruction, and certainly someone simply awaiting test results due to the exposure would be able to continue virtual teaching as normal. The argument for needing digital subs would only apply in the most extreme cases, and even then, good teachers always have several emergency plans on hand and will do the same if presenting digital lessons. Substitutes will be needed far less often in the virtual classroom. Whether in the physical classroom or not, this upcoming school year will require a lot of new skills for teachers. It will be so different from normal years, even if we bring students back. I know there are concerns that digital learning will not work. It was woefully inadequate in the spring, and digital learning is impersonal and will be too difficult for our veteran teachers. This county has spent more money than I am probably even aware of on devices for students, digital grading platforms, virtual teaching resources. It can work if all teachers are given digital support and lessons and ideas. This school year will already be impersonal. No group posters or sharing scissors or hanging out at lunch or playing sports. In my classroom, I will need to employ digital lessons regularly in order to keep kids separate, socially distanced in their seats. Remote and virtual digital teaching is daunting for all teachers, new to the profession or veterans, but will already need to be used in almost every classroom every day. I love teaching. I obviously did not get into this profession for the money, the fame, or the glory, nor did I get into this profession to sit at home in front of a screen day after day. But I also did not get into this profession with the assumption that my health or the health of any one of my students was expendable. In addition to content learning, socialization, and basic life skills, we are already tasked with teaching students how to respond to natural disasters, community emergencies, and active shooters. We are asked and expected and committed to keeping our students safe, and I don't see how sending them back to school at this time is upholding that promise. Thank you. Next comment is from Melanie. Yep. 13.
What's your pleasure, board?
One or two are lengthy, most of them are fairly brief. You'll receive them one way or the other as comments tomorrow. I don't know if each of them was received as an email or not.
I think we've gotten this far.
Okay.
I think we can finish.
Okay.
They're not, it's shut down, right? There's no more coming in.
That's correct. These were as of the beginning of the work meeting. Next comment is from Melanie. I would just like to point out that the teachers are not trained for this, and I find it really poor planning that there wasn't a workshop for them to learn from another virtual school director, or a workshop or video for parents outlining what a day would look like. Next comment is from Lauren. There's absolutely no reason for children of parents that are obviously going to get the work done to have to check in with teachers at certain times and interrupt the parents' workday. Meetings with classes should be live streamed and recorded with access for 24 hours. The next comment is from a scared teacher. I am writing to ask that you please postpone the in-person opening of the school year until we have stopped the spread and have a vaccine available. Parents have the option to keep their children home, and I commend you for that. However, your teachers need you. We do not have the option to all stay home. I'm a healthy person who would hate to take away the virtual option from a fellow teacher who needs that option more, but I'm not prepared to give my life or that of my family when the consequences of this virus are so severe. When a decision to all stay home and go to virtual is in place, teachers can lay down their anxieties and pick up their creative flows to prepare meaningful online experiences for their students. I have been waking up in the middle of the night for weeks worried about my health, my children's health, and the health of our community. The first deaths of children are just now starting to be reported, and it has already been shown that young adults spread the virus quickly and with consequences. We shut down with very little community cases and are now considering reopening with millions. Please think of your greatest asset, the staff. We need you now more than ever. Please vote to go full virtual the first semester at least and protect our families. Thank you. The next comment is from Olivia Haimani. I would like to request that the virtual aspect of our school this year be flexible. As a family with 2 working parents, our availability for school during traditional hours will be very limited, but our evening and weekends cannot be devoted entirely to working on school, as that would be a considerable increased load on our mental health. Please make sure classes available at varying times, that assignments are not too much of a burden on our family. We will need flexibility and grace as we tackle this entirely new school year. Thank you. This comment is from Lori Petrie. Please start school as soon as possible, even if only online for the first month. I for sure am an advocate for the hybrid plan beyond the grace period at opening, as I feel like the longer it is delayed, the longer folks will continue to travel to more highly infected places. Once kids have daily work, I feel like our number will hopefully level out due to less traveling. Next comment is from Brian Baker. I'm a teacher in the county and I have serious concerns about the current plan for this coming school year. There are many details to consider when students are in the building that are easy to overlook, but nevertheless need to be addressed for the safety of students and staff. While it seems like we cannot answer all of the questions until we are faced with them directly, if we wait and make mistakes that result in the spread of a serious illness instead of answering these questions ahead of time, then we are risking the health of our students and staff. Below are just a few of the questions and concerns that I feel need to be fully addressed before a school can safely reopen. What procedures will be in place in entrance areas, hallways, and common areas to enforce social distancing, mask wearing, and other necessary precautions? Who will monitor students when they are not in class, and can we ensure monitors' health will not be compromised in possibly crowded places? Are desks being cleaned between classes, and if so, by whom? Considering that students' bathrooms are often crowded between classes, how are health safety measures being assured there, and how often will bathrooms be sanitized? Hand washing is proven to be more effective than hand sanitizer, but with limited access to bathrooms that might be a distance from the classroom, how will we provide regular opportunities for students to wash their hands during class time? Bulk hand sanitizer is expensive and hard to buy right now, so can we guarantee this will be amply provided? How will teachers be able to even just wash their hands for their own health when they need to be in class and doing even more monitoring of students in common spaces, especially as some schools shift to eating lunch in classrooms? Right now, the policy states that students do not have to wear masks when seated and maintaining social distancing. Students, though, are not stationary objects that will sit still and maintain the correct distance at all times. What happens if a student needs to sharpen a pencil, throw something away, use hand sanitizer, or leave the classroom and has to cross the room so distancing is not possible? It seems like everyone should put their mask back on, and when this happens multiple times in a class, then students are handling the masks much more. If a student is seated without a mask and they unexpectedly cough or sneeze, could this spread germs beyond the 6-foot distance? The main purpose of wearing a mask is to limit the spread of germs from the individual wearing the mask. If a maskless student accidentally does something that spreads infection, it impacts the safety of students who chose to wear their mask at all times. Does each school have enough custodial staff to guarantee the increased requirements of essential, proper, and timely sanitation? We already have a substitute shortage, so how will that be addressed when these substitutes might be even more reluctant? Teachers will need to be cautious with any symptoms, which might lead to more days out across the many county schools, and teachers diagnosed with COVID-19 will need to be out for a period of time. My questions are not comprehensive, and there are many other issues that I have not included here. It is overwhelming to even think about, but I and my fellow teachers will have to take action on all of these issues if we open with even limited in-person classes. Next comment is from Andy Sams. Hello, our family has an incoming kindergarten student in RCPS. I would like to highlight a concern related to enforcement and consistency of best practices in mask wearing and other COVID battling hygiene. Based on the inconsistent use of masks by adults in our area in the general public, and the rampant disregard for the governor's life-saving mask orders, I'm worried that many students potentially exposed to their families who are not taking the required precautions will bring COVID into our schools. I'm also concerned that best practice behaviors prescribed by our medical experts related to mask wearing, hand washing, and social distancing will not be enforced or practiced consistently within our schools. It would be beneficial for the public to understand prior to the start of the school year how anti-COVID best practices will be administered. Having the assurance that best practices will be strictly followed would be reassuring. Thank you for your time and for considering these community input thoughts. Next comment is from Beth Lehman. Sincere thank you for leadership in these difficult times. In this time of so much uncertainty, My teenage kids are eager to get into more structured and productive routines, usually associated with the start of the school year. I hope that RCPS will consider holding to the planned start date of August 31, even if that means opening totally online with the hybrid classes organized as they would be in school. Such an opening would create a firm and manageable starting plan that families, students, and teachers can prepare for with confidence. Hopefully, by September 10th, it will be concluded that students may return to school in some capacity, and the hybrid classes could transition to in-school meetings. If it is not deemed safe to return to school then, and it is hard to anticipate the situation, online learning will already be up and running. Classes intended to be hybrid could then continue online and begin to meet at school as soon as it is safe to do so. The school year was cut short last year, and students are eager to get back to structured learning activities with their teachers and classmates. I would rather see schools begin online and look forward to returning to buildings and drawing out the already long and uncertain break from school experiences. Next comment from a parent. Please do not open schools and perpetuate the spread of COVID-19. I do not want to get sick, nor do I want to see my loved ones get sick or die. Next comment is from Jackie Sams. As the grandparent of 3 Rockingham County Public School students, I'm very concerned about their safety at school. In the course of their school day, they'll encounter bus drivers, office workers, maintenance workers, cafeteria workers, and of course their teachers. The children in the US haven't been acquiring COVID-19 because they haven't been in a group setting to be exposed to it. All of that will change if and when they attend school prior to the availability of a vaccination against COVID-19. When asked whether schools should open, an immunologist replied, "There's a very simple answer. Is it safe? My concern is for my grandchildren, their parents, and ultimately my husband and I, who are in a vulnerable position when it comes to COVID-19. I appreciate your careful consideration of the welfare of the students, family, and communities of Rockingham County. Thank you." Next comment is from Dale Sams. I'm the grandfather of 3 children enrolled in elementary school. We continue to hear on the news, in support of opening schools, that children are least likely to be infected by the coronavirus. However, school children are exposed 6 or 7 hours a day to other students, adult teachers, cafeteria workers, office staff, coaches, and parents in the school who may have been infected by the virus. When children return home from school each day, they bring with them anything and everything that they have been exposed to in school that day, and they stay with caregivers, parents, grandparents, etc., and can potentially expose them, some of whom may be very vulnerable. This virus is not under control. It is not responsible to open schools until the virus is controlled and there's an effective treatment regimen and vaccinations can be administered. Next comment is from Nora Fletcher, J. Frank Hilliard teacher. I'm writing to ask that you postpone the in-person opening. I'm very anxious about myself and my colleagues coming in contact with so many students and staff members all indoors through a week's time. I'm extremely worried about the lack of protective equipment, the idea that students can remove masks indoors when seated, the substitute shortage we already face in the northern end of the county, and the fact that cases continue to surge. Many families in our area rely on schools for childcare, and I know that it is a burden to teach at home, but I do not feel that these considerations outweigh the health and safety of teachers and staff, students, and their families. I commend you for offering a virtual option for families, but that same option is not available for all teachers unless you close the in-person learning option. Teachers are ready to take on the new challenges of online learning for fall, but are not ready to risk their lives for less than ideal in-person, for less than ideal in-person teaching. Please postpone in-person opening until we have a vaccine and cases are on the decline. One life lost in RCPS community is one too many. Thank you for your time and caring for our staff. And the final comment comes from a student, Caleb Kuroga, who is, I believe, a student at Hilliard. Members of the school board, students in Rockingham County in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades have the opportunity to enroll in a weekly religion course. Rockingham County Public Schools is a public school, and religion has no place in a public school. In 1963, the United States Supreme Court, regarding the case of Abington School District versus Schempp, ruled 8-1 and said that it's unconstitutional to have a school-sponsored religion class. I understand that RCPS doesn't fund this course, but it takes time that students could use to learn. Students who choose not to participate in this program have to spend the time studying and are separated from their friends over religion. With all that is known, weekly religion education is unconstitutional to have in Rockingham County Public Schools and should be removed. Thank you. And that was the last comment.
Oh, all right. One last call for speakers. Thank you. Highlights by board members. I'll begin with Ms. Lohr.
Thank you. Oh. Just want to say we had one good highlight, one great thing happen in that Rockingham County Fair will be pared down and will be returning to its agricultural roots, but will be happening. I'm excited about that. And I just want to thank all of the fair board members and our ag teachers who have worked so hard to make this possible for our students. We're really excited to have some time to exhibit those projects that our students have been working really hard on all year. Yay, there's a fair. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I would like to thank all of the people who commented this evening, both online and in person. We appreciate hearing from you. We received emails, telephone calls, in person, at the school board, and this tells me we have an engaged community, and we are grateful for everybody who supports our schools. Thank you very much. I would like also to say that one of my highlights was visiting summer school. I went to 2 elementaries and a middle school, and I was very glad to be able to see the safety protocol in place and to see the students. They seemed to be very happy to be there. The teachers were very happy to be there, and it was a good experience for me to be able to witness this in person. And thank you for the Zoom call that we had with the teachers, although Ms. Reed and I were the only 2 school board members there because we can't have any more than 2 or it becomes a meeting and it has to be announced, et cetera, et cetera. But we represented the school board members who weren't able to be present at the meeting, and we were very glad to be able to hear what everyone had to say. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. A couple of things. One is congratulations, Ms. Woodrum, being the new administrator here at Rockingham Academy. So we didn't get a chance to do that at our last meeting because we approved your placement at that. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. We're looking forward to all the exciting things that you're going to continue and start new. And thank you for your hospitality this evening too. Second thing is being in here, I was reflecting a little bit in how we were here 2 years ago with the governor and the Secretary of Education for the state of Virginia, and the discussion we were having about changing what education looked in both Rockingham County and, trying to influence some changes in the state regarding SOLs and a number of things. And we had I think we had 1 representative from each school and some senior leaders from the division, and it was a really engaging, well thought out of. We were so impressed with how our staff in the discussion went, and that was really the seed that has brought us where we are today. This is not a great time. It's an extraordinary time. There's a lot of things going on, but everything that we've done in the past 2 or 3 years has brought us to this place that we are right now to work out these decisions together and to make these changes that we may need to make and to pivot and do what's necessary for our children in Rockingham County. So I thought it was kind of interesting that we were here at RA tonight. As Dr. McQuilkin said, we met with some teachers via Zoom. Mr. Breeden and I also met with RCA members this week. So we are trying to engage and have conversations, and we appreciate the way that engagement has gone and the opportunity to share information. We have a lot of things to think about, and there's a lot of equity issues, and there's a lot of concerns, and there's a lot of fear in our community. And quite frankly, as I said in the late fall when we were making some different decisions, we have 40,000 people that have an opinion right now about what we need to do. And they all have their own personal stories. We're trying to hear what those stories are and what their concerns are. but it's 40,000 people. And I would imagine there isn't anybody in this room that is watching our video that wants to sit in these 6 seats right now. So, but we're trying to do the best we can. We're trying to do the best that we can for our students. And I have been struck by some of the commentary that we've got regarding the pivot to virtual learning, but there's lots of questions that are associated with going there too. And so I haven't heard a lot of suggestions about those. I think this board would, and Dr. Schleifer would welcome some. I know that his senior leaders, if we need to do that, there's going to be some repercussions. And I think our speakers have also mentioned that about our most vulnerable students, but also our students who are in challenging gifted programs, and the needs of all of our students. So none of these decisions are without challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Mr. Reed.
Well, I think that the weight of the moment, the weight of this decision precludes a highlight. But I would say that I want to thank everyone who has contacted me through email or in person or through the comments here tonight. Every day I hear from folks who say, go back to school with no restrictions. And I hear from folks who say, don't go back to school at all. And it seems that inevitably, as I communicate with them, they say, you're not hearing me. I want to be heard. Everyone within the sound of my voice this evening, you're being heard. When I lay down at night and try to go to sleep, you're being heard. I hear, along with your voices, the voice of my wife and son who have joined me every day during this pandemic to run our business, because as a self-employed person, we had no choice. Wondering every day if the next person that we came in contact with was the one that was going to infect us with COVID-19. I hear the voice of my elderly parent who is currently hospitalized for a non-COVID illness. I worry about what she will be exposed to at the hospital, but she needs to be there. I say these things to you to demonstrate, hopefully, that I get it. The burden and responsibility brought upon us by COVID-19 is more than I've had to bear. But I also understand the need to continue life as best we can. And with all that said, at the end of the day, as I'm wrestling with sleep, I'm still just a contractor and a car salesman. I'm not a public health expert. I'm not a doctor. So as I weigh this decision personally, I will rely upon my own personal faith and on the best science that's available to me. But I do hear you.
I think a lot of the important comments about the varying opinions regarding opening of schools have already been made. A lot of the comments that teachers and others in the community have submitted have been known to us for a long time. We received comments about reopening as soon as schools closed, what should come next. And I think the one misconception that I want to correct in my remarks is that somehow there's a group at central office of 5, 10, 15 people. A lot of us, Dr. So-and-so, we're not those kinds of doctors, we always say that, sitting there and making decisions about what we should do, regardless of what the science says. And that's simply not true. That's not how the process works. In fact, I would say that as a group, we probably have read as much of the research related to SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 as anyone in the school division. We have weekly meetings with health experts at the state level. We've had phone calls with health experts at the local level. And all of the decisions that are made, all the details of the plan about how to reopen safely, how classrooms, bathrooms, and so on are going to be cleaned, what the process will be for health screenings? What happens when a student or a staff member is diagnosed or has a positive test? What does it look like to come back to work? All of those are details that are being developed with guidelines from the CDC, with guidelines from the Virginia Department of Health. We were in a 4-hour meeting again today to still review every bullet point in that plan to make sure that by the time we submit it to the Department of Education and to the Virginia Department of Health, that all possible scenarios are being considered. And so none of this happens by just school administrators making those decisions. They're all based on guidelines that come from various organizations, whether that's the World Health Organization, whether that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or whether that's the Virginia Department of Health, or local physicians. All of these are based on medical guidelines. And so there's a lot of conversation around, what a safe return to school looks like. And the New York Times asked 132 epidemiologists. So they study this more than we do, obviously, every day and have for years and decades. And there's a broad range of responses. So it doesn't mean that some of those epidemiologists are just crazy. They want an unsafe return. No, they all look at the same information, they interpret it, and they make decisions based on their expertise. And I can guarantee you, it's the only way we make decisions. And to make that point, I did send out a video to all staff today to make that point. We had a lot of feedback about that video, because people need to know that whatever we discuss, so our reopening plan in terms of a transition phase is exactly that. It's one phase. And if people looked at the presentation and listened to what I said at that meeting, it was that the decision about which phase we would be in is made based on public health data, and it is made based on advice from experts. And at this point, we are still weeks away. We don't know what the community spread in Rockingham County will be. It's one of the reasons Dr. Shiflett will present the potential for later opening. We know that the fair will take place at a more limited format, but still with an expected 10,000 people there. We know that more than 20,000 college students will come into town at about the time we were originally scheduled to open. Those are all factors that don't allow us to predict community spread, because as much as people consider Harrisonburg and Rockingham a hotspot, according to the metrics that are used to define hotspots, Rockingham County is not one. What you use is the number of daily new cases per 1,000 population. And that's been over the last 14 days at 0.89. So we are below that. We've been below 1 for a number of days now. Again, always looking 14 days back. So we're not in the worst position. The Central Shenandoah Health District has the second lowest positivity rate of tests in the state. So we're not in an area that is like Hampton Roads. We look at all that, but we don't just look at it and say, hey, look at this number, 0.89. What do we do with that? Right? We run that by health experts. And so just to give you one example, if we don't feel confident in the testing ability, in contact tracing, in the local disease spread, we will not open the way we had originally said. It depends on what experts advise us to do. This is a public health decision. And here's how this is going to play out, for example, tomorrow. At 2 p.m., our leadership team will be in a conference call with the regional director from the Virginia Department of Health, who will have with her a VDH epidemiologist. We will also have another member from the VDH office, from the regional office, in addition to a local pediatrician, in addition to a local family practitioner who actually spoke at a board meeting previously that many of you may have listened to, who I spoke again to this morning about what we see and what differences he sees between elementary students and middle and high school students. In addition to that, there will be the Harrisonburg superintendent and a researcher from Brown University who specifically researches COVID-19. So those are the folks that we talk to all the time. And so anytime we have an issue, we look at expert advice. And I can have all the conversations about MIT studies regarding aerosol spread and what viable viral particles were the researchers able to find in that. But it's not for a superintendent and a classroom teacher to argue over MIT research because neither one of us is an expert in that field. And so we use those pieces of research to guide us, but only to ask questions of the actual experts. Virginia Department of Health is developing a new dashboard that has metrics in it that will support public school divisions in decision making. That's what we look for. And so I think that's what people need to understand. When we set guidelines and when we develop our plans, they are based on what health experts say. And every single one of those items is then again brought to those health experts, and we push back. Dr. Alderfer and I were in meetings with VDH early on where we pushed every topic that we could think of to say, well, where's the data for that? How do you justify that churches can open, but we can't have in-person graduations at 50% capacity? Everything. We push back. And only when we're happy with what the response is from those experts do we then make a decision that is based on expert advice. So this is not a decision-making process from public school administrators, right? And when people say Harrisonburg is going to virtual learning, I spoke to the Harrisonburg superintendent today, that may be as many, because it's not just fully virtual, it is fully virtual plus in-person instruction for identified students. That may be as many as 40% of the students in the city, right? It's not that simple. Everything's complicated, and we try to simplify it in our conversations with the experts so we can then bring those messages to the public. So that's the one thing I want everyone to understand. This is complicated stuff. And it makes, just like many teachers have said, it makes us live in it 24/7, because when we go to bed, we dream about it, and then we wake up to the reality of it, and it's constant, never stops. And our only way to make good decisions is to let the public health experts drive the process. And so we don't do anything without expert advice. And again, as I said to the teachers that were on the Zoom call, all of the questions that they brought to us, we had already worked with. But again, those are being brought to the physicians, to VDH for more guidance. And so if what it takes is to have masks all day long, then that's what will happen. There is no question about that. And those aren't things that can't be changed between now and 6 weeks from now or 5 weeks from now. And we will do that. And so rest assured, we have access to more experts than we've ever had before in the area of public health, and we're taking advantage of it, and we're not making decisions without that. And so ultimately, many people will be unhappy. Again, like Mr. Breeden has said, we have people saying this is a hoax and we should just open 5 days a week with all the kids in the building because the rest of the world only conspired to affect a presidential election in this country, right? That's one side. And we're not giving in to opinions that are not based on public health expertise. On the other hand, if people expect a bubble that will keep everyone perfectly safe, our health experts will also tell us that there's a cost on that side too. There are students whose only caring adult is in the school building and they've not had access to that person for months. There are people, there are students who suffer every day because they're not in school. And there is the potential that we lose students mentally when they are not in our buildings. And plans are being developed for all of that. For staff too. I have a paper here, from our mental health team. Becky Hill-Shiflett is working, to ensure that our staff and students feel comfortable seeking help and resources, that there's a continued transition for everyone in our school communities as they prepare for an academic year with new procedures, that transitions bring excitement, anxiety, concern, and other complex emotions as staff, students, and parents wonder what the return to classrooms will be like. And her team is working on that. It's complicated, and complicated questions require sometimes complicated answers. And we try to simplify them so that there's a sense that here are the most important things for staff, families, and students to keep in mind. That doesn't mean that there aren't 20, 30-page long plans that cover all the details, but we can't discuss every detail on end in public. Those plans will be available. They will be vetted by public health experts, and that's how we need to operate. And so, long story short, complicated question, complicated answers, but nothing is done without those who have the highest level of expertise in the field. I promise you that, and that's how we've been operating since March. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scheikel. Moving into the action part of our agenda, we have need to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2020 meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, please vote. Looks like it's a pass. Policy revisions. Dr. Alda. Are there any questions for Dr. Alda on policy revisions? Hearing,
Dr. Oliver is looking at me. I'm going to ask him a question, but I'm not going to ask him a question tonight because we have 37 comments, Dr. Oliver. So we'll wait until your next.
I just wanted to make sure no other questions from board members. Do recommend approval of the policies as presented by Dr. Alder.
I'm going to move that we accept the policy recommendation as presented.
thank you, Ms. Reed. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Pardon me.
No, I wouldn't.
And I just refreshed.
Aye. Policy revisions pass. Going into the information item part of the agenda, 2020-2021 school calendar revision.
So Dr. Shiflett will present a draft calendar for your review. We've had a number of conversations over the last few weeks about the potential impact of both the Rockingham County Fair and college students returning. And there's still ongoing conversation, as was shown earlier with the comments about whether a virtual opening should be considered, whether students should come back in the blended plan. And so I'd ask Dr. Shiflett to present a calendar that has one significant change in terms of the opening dates.
So, thank you all. Chair Falk, members of the board, Dr. Scheikel. I shared with you a proposal to shifting the start date to Thursday, September the 10th. As Dr. Scheikel earlier, that the week, August the 24th, that week is when our local colleges and universities, many of them will be coming back into our community. And by pushing the starting date of our school back to September 10th, that will give us an opportunity to look at the data to see if there's been a spike or an increase in the number of COVID cases in our community. And coupled with the fair will be taking place as well a week prior to that, and we'll have an opportunity as well to see if there's been any increases because of that large gathering. Obviously, will not be the Rockingham County Fair that we're used to, but better than no fair. So that, and then also just time. More time for us to prepare for the blended model of instruction that we're going to be offering to our students, which is unique. right? We'll have students in front of us for 2 days, but then for 3 days, we'll be obligated to prepare learning opportunities for them there. And as well, we have over about 2,000 students who have said they would like to participate in our home learning academy. And we need to make sure that we're ready for that to make sure we're prepared and can do that. And at the same time, we have to be ready to pivot. If there's an increase in cases, we've got to be able to go to fully virtual, right? I'm an optimist, so maybe things are better and we'll go fully, get kids in school. I mean, that's where we want them, right? Dr. McQuilkin shared earlier our experience last Tuesday, I think, visiting some schools and seeing them in our buildings. It's very powerful. So, and with that, you'll see that first semester would have 88 days. So not quite the normal 90, and the second semester would have 87. So I do just want to remind you of something. Maybe you kind of sometimes forget little pieces or details. In our very first calendar that you guys approved in the spring, there were 185 instructional days on that calendar, and 5 of those were for inclement weather. And it's not going to snow this winter. Well, we're looking at opportunities for remote learning this school year, so we could leverage some of that. So so we were able to recapture some days. So moving the calendar back, at first I thought, man, we're going to be in a really bad spot. We're at 175 instructional days, so that's really not a bad place to be if we would go to September the 10th. Do you have any questions about the proposal?
And I would add that after tomorrow's meeting with our, public health officials, we will have additional information about, what data we need to look at. There's a study out of University of Pennsylvania that looked at the impact of colleges with significant student populations returning to rural areas where population almost doubles as a result of those colleges. And so what we may actually see, even before we may see a spike that could take maybe a little bit longer than 2.5, 3 weeks, is student behavior. JMU is putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that students know that one of the reasons they are able to come back in person is that they have to follow certain mitigation strategies. This Thursday, there will be a meeting between Harrisonburg City Schools, Rockingham County Public Schools, county officials, city officials, Centera, RMH, JMU, Bridgewater, EMU, to start public service announcements that we will all be involved in to drive the messages to college students. Because in that study, when they looked at what can happen if students ignore the mitigation strategies, within a few weeks, basically all college students would have been infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. When students followed the recommended procedures in terms of distancing, in terms of wearing face coverings, even as they met socially, it was limited to about 60 students, out of 20,000. And so it is that community spread that everyone's trying to get under control. President Alger at JMU and also the presidents at Bridgewater and EMU are fully committed to doing that work. And so as a school division, we will have a better sense, what the efforts are and whether they are successful at the college level before we then, begin school. Because again, there is certainly lots of interaction socially, but also we will have student teachers in our buildings at some point. And so there are a lot of conversations that still need to take place. And, looking at post-Labor Day opening, which is fairly common across Virginia, it's just because of snow days that's not as common in the Valley, would, put us in a position to take account of everything so that we can have the best opening possible. And again, based on the public health advice, I think next week would be the time then to have a more extensive conversation around what our opening may look like under different conditions. And this is one of them.
So to be clear, this is our plan, but we are prepared to pivot, and our parents should also be prepared to pivot to 100% online learning, correct?
There are multiple options, for example, if we, again, this is a question for the researchers tomorrow. For the longest time, we've said one of the key pieces of information that we don't have yet is the level at which children spread the virus. We've known for a while that they can be infected and can suffer consequences. But the really important question for school environments is, do they spread it? Because there are, a lot of people who use this line, they don't get it and they don't spread it. Well, we know the don't get it part was wrong. That's been wrong for a while. Whether or not children spread it, the first study that really looked at that at a larger scale just came out last week in South Korea. And so what they looked at was kids who were the first in a family, at least the first known case in a family, and what happened to the adults in the family, what happened to the other family members. And so at the middle and high school level, middle and high schoolers do spread the disease. That's known. And so that really leads to different strategies at that level when you compare that to elementary students. At the elementary level, the data is less clear yet, but there's some indication that it may be possible. But in this particular study, they found that in lockdown situations, so where family members interacted for weeks at a time and in close contact, that where they found that a child under 10 was the index carrier, so the first one in the family, in 1 out of 20 cases, an adult would have been infected. But it's still not clear whether actually that child was the first case in many of these. So that's being studied further, but there is clear evidence that elementary children are less likely to be spreaders. And so that has led to different recommendations. And that's also, again, in many places that have open schools back in the spring still, what they saw, that at the elementary level, there was no impact of schools opening on community spread. But again, there are other factors that we need to take into consideration and talk to public health officials about. So what the plan could be is that elementary schools continue with a hybrid plan, but middle and high schools go virtual if we're not comfortable at that level. It could be that all schools go virtual, or that we continue with the hybrid plan at all levels. And again, I don't think that decision should be finalized until we've had a conversation with public health officials and also have the metrics, because sometimes that can happen on short notice as well, right? So if we feel confident that we can move forward with a hybrid plan, but if it's a week before school, something happens, then we need to account for that. And one of the pieces that we also look at, for example, is if middle and high schools, for example, are virtual and elementary schools go, now you have middle and high school space. So community agencies that provide childcare, like Boys and Girls Club, for example, for students who are not in the building, one of the key pieces that they're looking for is space. And so it all, again, goes into that conversation. If middle and high schools, for example, were to be virtual with utilizing Zoom or something like that, that now space would be available for elementary students, childcare programs that organizations like Boys and Girls Club could run. And so again, there's a complex set of circumstances where each decision affects a number of other pieces, but that can also be helpful to the community. So after the conversations, with the public health officials, once we know the metrics, then we have a better sense next week again of what our plan as of now should be, what the start date should be, and what we would look at in terms of having to make a change to the plan.
And graduation, this will not affect graduation date, right? We'll still in, that's our current plan, right?
You're talking about graduation next June?
Yes, if we make it that far.
Yeah, so if people are already making travel plans for next June to come to graduation ceremonies, at this point, we have not said that we would push the school year, the end of the school year later, because you're also, Dr. Schiffler would know how many days are still built in the spring, because the spring part of the calendar is still built on the hope that there'll be more in-person instruction. And so if for some odd reason, the 180-day requirement or the 990-hour requirement were not to be waived by the Department of Education, then we could still find the days. But in terms of distance learning, right? I cannot imagine that would happen, partly because some of the recommendations coming out of Richmond are the number of hours that they recommend in distance learning programs. They would never add up to 990. So I can't really see that won't be waived. But if that were the case, because all of a sudden the situation improves, then certainly we can find those days without extending the school year. So yes, graduation is still expected to happen on the dates, on the calendar, in person,
Good, because I've got one
at
graduating.
the
so
football
let's make that
stadium.
happen.
Yeah.
But don't ask me for certainty on that, because again, we don't know what the metrics will be this Thursday after our conversations.
There's a note, a special note in the sidebar of the calendar that I shared with you that mentions that we will revisit the second semester in January. So depending on what phase we're in and how things are progressing, we may have to come back in January and make some tweaks to the calendar to get us in a good spot. But as of now, the last day of school would be Thursday, June 10th, based on this proposal.
And that's not a change.
That is not a change.
And then one final question, I think. Teachers will still come back August 14th, but students will come back September 10th if they can come back in person. That gives us almost a full month to do what?
Well,
I mean, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you say it.
So, okay. So one of the things that our teachers will be doing is collaborating with each other, building some modules, online learning modules that kids can do asynchronously. They would work on, again, if we're in the blended model and they're with the teacher 2 days, they'll need work for the 3 days that they're not in the building. So they'll have to be working on what does that look like, right? It's not just homework, it's direct instruction, right? Looking at like a flip model, right? Maybe helping teachers learn how to video themselves presenting a lesson, right? And then the kids can watch it at home and then come back to class, get the help with while the teacher's there. We also are working, I'll be working with Mrs. Judd to help us navigate who's going to be teaching the 2,000 students who would like to be part of the Home Learning Academy. We have to navigate that and to be coordination and planning with that. We're also trying to structure that in a way so that if we have to go fully virtual, that framework could then be used for all students, not just the ones who've chosen to be in the Home Learning Academy. So a lot of work is going to be done with curriculum and planning. That's, and there'll be some professional development for teachers. How do you do this, right? So we'll own it. Maybe we weren't the greatest come March 13th, but we had 1 day to prepare. It's like we had a day off to prepare and get ready. But I think this would give us more time. And mentioning this to our administrators as just a proposal to the board this past week or the previous week, they all were thankful for having additional time. Remember, our secondary folks are moving to a 4x4 schedule, right? So that's new for them. So they're trying to build a master schedule in a new world. And plus, we've got to account for some students who are no longer going to be in our buildings. And how do we build a schedule for those kids as well? So when they come back in January, things flow smoothly. A lot of moving parts. And, we're up to the task, but having a little more time to do the work would be very advantageous for all those involved.
There's also flexibility that we can provide, for example, for MTC. So in a normal year, we usually start, and Harrisonburg starts a little bit later, but you see the Harrisonburg students coming to MTC before their school year officially starts. We've had that conversation, with city schools potentially starting August 31st, with Kevin Hutton at MTC. MTC has an entirely different setup so even if we were to go virtual at the middle and high school level, MTC has an entrance into every classroom that is just for that classroom. And so that allows the school to have different mitigation components in place where students really don't interact in the building with other students in other programs. It's really limited to those 12 students that may be in that classroom at a time. Many of the classrooms have their own locker rooms. They may have their own restrooms. So it's a completely different environment. And so we're working with MTC to ensure, that the fire and rescue program isn't all of a sudden unable to create the workforce, that Chief Holloway needs, to have firefighters, because they have very specific requirements in terms of the number of hands-on components, the hours that they have to complete. And so again, it's an unusual circumstance, but we will work with MTC to ensure that the students that can go there can begin at the same time as Harrisonburg does, and there would be a different transportation option. And again, those are all ongoing conversations with MTC and with Harrisonburg to make sure that where we can provide flexibility and something different for that building, that we do, because again, that's a critical pipeline for many of our areas, in the community, not just fire and rescue, but many others as well. The nursing program, for example, we wouldn't want the nursing program to shut down in the middle of a pandemic, right? That would be absolutely a negative consequence, and it can be done safely there.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Other questions? Thank you, Dr. Shipley. Next item on the agenda are school board questions or statements, as you will. Let's start with Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I was hoping you'd start with me this time. Because I want to say to everyone who is here and everyone who is at home watching this Zoom meeting, this YouTube meeting, that our utmost concern is safety. Safety first. Safety for our staff, safety for our students, for the parents, for the families, for the community. This is our number one concern, and everything we do revolves around that safety. And we, even though we have a difficult decision, we have a decision that is based upon science and research and finding the best information, the vetted information that we can to make decisions for safety of everyone involved.
Thank you. Ms. Lois.
Thank you. I've had a few questions asked of me by community members that I'd like to just ask tonight. The first one deals with clear face masks. We have a supply of clear face masks, and what is our plan with those, especially for our students with special needs?
I think Mr. Hand can speak to that potentially. That was one of the first questions when we talked about returning to school, that students who need to be able to see someone speak will have access to those. And just like with many of the other supplies, hand sanitizers came up earlier. I'm not sure why someone would be told that we'll have a shortage of hand sanitizer. I know that schools aren't necessarily purchasing, some of the equipment and some of the supplies, but that's done at the county level. Even at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, there was a presentation about the amount of money that's being spent on supplies across the board. We ordered face masks, we ordered some plexiglass shields, we've ordered hand sanitizer. There are lots of cleaning supplies that are ordered at the division level to be distributed to schools, 250 of the infrared thermometers, and so on. And so I know that Mr. Hand had made that request early on too. And again, I'm not involved in every specific order, but that's certainly part of the process, that where students need to be able to visually see someone speak, that there are different masks made available for that.
So we do have masks available. Awesome. Dr. Hand is giving me a thumbs up, so thank you. How did summer school go? Are we still doing summer school? Or did it end this week? Still doing summer school? So we're in the second of 3? Okay, or in the third of 3 weeks. Mhm. But it went well. I'm getting lots of yeses from the crowd. So yay. And I know a lot of people have asked, and I know Dr. Scheichel has an excellent answer, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it publicly. What happens if we have a possible positive?
Yeah, I was asked that by TV3 today as well. So there is a protocol, again, that's developed in consultation with public health officials. And so if we have, this is, for example, why the physical distancing requirements are what they are. There is a question when someone has tested positive or is diagnosed. Sometimes a diagnosis is made not necessarily based on a test, but by a physician who has a patient who exhibits, for example, a fever and a loss of taste and smell. You know, the classic combination of symptoms that right now would indicate COVID-19. So someone can be diagnosed with that. And so what happens is, obviously that person will no longer be in the school building. And then there's a question about who was in close contact with that person. And so again, for that, we use definitions that are developed by the CDC and also that VDH uses. And that is, you know, exposure is defined as being within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more. And so that's what triggers then contact tracing. And so they look back, you know, depending on whether the person's symptomatic. So there are decision trees that we use depending on the circumstances, usually with the involvement of VDH to determine what the next steps are. And that triggers contact tracing that can trigger people being quarantined. But it does not mean that because there's a positive case in a school that the school will immediately shut down, right? It depends on the circumstances. And that's why keeping groups of students together and observing the physical distancing is key. Because again, the exposure being defined of within 6 feet distance.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
No, I just, you know, I think they call this a novel coronavirus because we've never seen it before. And I think the theme also is that things change as we deal with it, as we learn about it. I've seen some posts recently where folks are sort of throwing shade at Dr. Fauci because in March he said you don't need a mask. But we figured out that masks work. And we don't know what the circumstances are going to be a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. But I'm pleased at the way that not only our school system, but we're reacting, we're dealing with these things, and we're adaptable. I had said to someone the other day to kind of put it in perspective, we started mass producing automobiles in this country about 1903, somewhere around there. And it took us about 60 years and thousands of deaths to figure out that you might stand a better chance if you had a seatbelt in your car. So they required manufacturers to put seatbelts in cars. It took us another 30 years plus and thousands more deaths to say those seatbelts are so effective, you'll get a ticket if you don't wear one. Now, thank goodness we're doing better than 90 years to figure out that things like face masks work. But it's going to be very fluid. And, you know, it would be wonderful if Dr. Scheichel could sit here tonight and say, yes, this is going to happen on September 1st, and this is going to happen for graduation. If you figure those things out, sir, not only will it be good for Rockingham County, but I suspect it will be a great revenue source for Rockingham County if you could figure that out. So bear with us, folks. One of the comments earlier mentioned grace. Grant us some grace as we try to navigate through this novel virus.
Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I'm just going to piggyback on Mr. Breeden. Give us some grace and be kind. I think I've seen every adjective used to mention both senior leaders and the leadership of the school board and the board members use social media, in the press, in conversations, in chats. We're all trying. And our families see us trying. They see us not sleeping, as Mr. Breeden said, working on vacations, having meetings, working full-time jobs and having meetings. So be kind. This is a very difficult situation. And at the last meeting, I said, if you're a praying person, pray for all of us. Pray for our community, pray for the school board, pray for our board of supervisors, and pray for our students, because that's really important right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can just, applaud the school board members for being so gracious when motives are questioned and when decision-making is questioned, because, I've said many times before, it's, I'm in this position to be a lightning rod sometimes, and that's okay, and people can question how I go about it. But to question the investment of time and effort that we have 5 members who are elected publicly with no benefits for being on a board other than to be yelled at and to be criticized is sometimes frustrating to me, just as when my leadership team gets criticized. I know how much time everyone puts in. It's okay. If people want to direct it at me, that's all good. I'm here for that, and I'll take that into consideration and, bring the best decision that I can think of, from my team to the board. But thanks to the board, and thanks again to all the leaders in Rockingham County Schools. Of course, also thanks to those who question us, because that needs to happen. Those in positions of power need to be questioned. We don't need unquestioned power. That's one of the ways we go down a really dark path. And so it's okay. It's better when people do it with grace, but ultimately, again, I don't mind when people question what I do and how I go about it. But what everyone needs to understand is that no one's taking this easy. My daughter lost her sense of smell and taste for a couple of weeks when she was positive. That's not a fun way to be. My mother would probably die if she were infected because of her health conditions. And I know there are people in the room who've lost people. And so take that into consideration. We know we don't take this easily, but if you want to direct your criticism of someone, my email address is available to everyone, and that's where it should go. And but everyone else, people are working very, very hard to make these decisions, and board members have a very thankless position sometimes. And so I ask the public to, direct their wrath that they may feel is necessary at my office. That's all good. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a couple observations. I tend to do that. I tend to watch and observe and learn. Rockingham County has been very well prepared for an emergency application of different ideas by going to best practices conference for the past several years and taking our best people to those conferences, so that they were, while no one anticipated the coronavirus pandemic, we were in the process of examining different ways of educating children and educating all children in the way that they need. So this leadership team in Rockingham County that we have now has been very, very good at taking a terrible situation and taking advantage of the learning opportunities that it presents to help the community at this time and for in the future. So we've got a really good team of people in Rockingham County from all personnel, but especially in our leadership team. So I want to thank you all for that. Thank you, Dr. Tuck. You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And I'm like Forrest Gump. That's all I got to say about that. We have need now. Let me get caught up with the agenda here. We have need to enter into closed meeting. May I have a motion?
I move that the board enter a closed meeting for the purpose to discuss and consider the following pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individual's assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, or resignation, and specifically related to the annual evaluation of the superintendent, and A2, one or more particular students specifically related to requests regarding compulsory school attendance based on religious beliefs that would involve disclosure of information contained in a scholastic record concerning a student.
Thank you for the motion, Ms. Laura. May I have a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to enter into closed meeting. Is there any discussion to be had? Hearing none, please cast your vote. The motion passes. We are now in closed session. Thank you very much for coming and listening and caring.